Shalom Aleichem, Malachei Hasharet, Malachei Elyon. Mi Melech Malchei Amlachim HaKadosh Baruch Hu.
All right, so first, I'd like to thank you all for coming out on a Sunday evening. I'm sure you have plenty of other things you could have been doing, and I appreciate you coming out. Second, I'd like to dedicate this class to my dear father, Olav Shalom, Cantor Avrum Davis, who was an inspiration to me. He was a great chazan, who also was a master at involving everyone in beautiful tefillah. My father had an extraordinary gift to bring all his mispalim into this special place that they all wanted to sing along. And it was a very spiritual kind of experience, and it had a profound impact on me. As I see Steve Lazara sitting over here, Steve and I used to walk to shul together in Far Rockaway in what I guess we used to refer to as Camelot, because we had the great Rabbi Rackman as the rabbi and my father as the chazan, and it was an extraordinary religious and spiritual experience. As I said, he was a master at involving everybody in davening, and his daveners were his choir. For those of you who don't know, my father, and I'm very proud of this, was the first person to make Nusach records. And people all over the world, from Australia to South Africa to Texas, they learned how to daven from my father's recordings. Gary Rosenblatt over at the Jewish Week used to say that he remembered how those recordings went, and my father would start, let's say, Malchios, or Zichronos, or Shofros, or he would continue with parts of Shacharis, and he would say, he'd start singing it, and then and he'd do a basic Nusach, and then he'd say, and continue the same way till the end of the page. And people just learned it somehow that way. So in a sense, what I'm doing is I'm attempting to follow in his footsteps. And I hope I'm successful at communicating to you some of what I learned from him. Also, Eli Khan, I see you back here. Between you and Eli Zamek and Vel Pasternak and Mike Soicher, whenever I had a question about some melodies that I wanted to include the davening, is it this mode, is it that mode, who wrote it, they'd get these calls from me on their cells or wherever, and always are very patient, and they shared a lot of their knowledge with me, and for that I'm very grateful too. Third, I want to say thank you to Rav Kellemer, who's not here this evening. I want to thank he and Rabbi Galler and Joe Kogel and David Ritholtz, who obviously couldn't be here tonight, for encouraging me to do this. They felt that it was important. I'd also like to thank the other rabbis who encouraged people from other shuls to come here, and I hope that what I bring to you tonight is something that's going to be useful to you. What's very interesting about tonight, as far as I'm concerned, is I've been thinking about this a ton, really, really a lot. And so I actually spent days writing and writing and writing. And then I discovered by the end of my writing, it was a very interesting sermon. I'm not a rabbi, and there shouldn't be a sermon. So hopefully what I say tonight will be Dvarim hayotzim min halev nichnasim el halev. So I'm going to go back a little bit to the original flyer that we put together. So it was called Take the Lead in Leading Davening. And then I think a subtitle to that was How to Be a Better Baal Tefilah. And then following that was Nusach and Why It Matters. So interestingly enough, most of what I'd written, I'm going to kind of throw by the wayside and speak from the gut. Davening is very hard. I see you here, David Linder. David's a wonderful example of somebody who takes his personal davening very, very seriously. Frankly, to watch him daven is an inspiration to me. And Rabbi Jonathan Sachs, in his introduction and his siddur, and I'm only paraphrasing here, essentially referred to tefillah, to davening, as sort of an attempt at an intimate conversation with God. And hopefully that can be transformative. So as I said, davening is hard. And if you want to have an intimate conversation, you don't think about having an intimate conversation in a room with 400 people. But that's what Tefillah b'tzibur is. And so when I think about Tefillah b'tzibur, and there's in the sheets you'll notice I put some ideas here in front of you. In Tefillah b'tzibur, you have to think about a lot of stuff. And I found this to be very instructive to me and very interesting. So many of you sitting in this room tonight, and I know I was this way too, we were brought up primarily brought up Shomer Shabbos, went to yeshivas, we went and we did what we did. And we davened. And generally, by the way, we davened, that's a different issue altogether. The kids, all of us learned, remember, Baruch Shamar V'Hayolam, Baruch Hu, Baruch, etc. And then, for instance, in the Avos, you learned Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu V'Elokei Voseinu. We learned it, and we did it. But it didn't necessarily resonate with us. And so, like so many of you, maybe more, some people here sitting here are more disciplined than I was. But I davened at home. I davened. What do you mean davening? I put on my talis, put on my tefillin. Sometimes I had more kavanah, sometimes I had less kavanah. And how many of you, of course, heard the saying everybody uses that, I daven by Mkoisel, daven by the wall. And so I wasn't necessarily a regular minyan goer. I went occasionally. And then the Rebbeinu Shalom said, I'm not a minyan goer. He says, Azoi. And I found myself saying Kaddish for my mother. And then 2 years later, I found myself saying Kaddish for my father. And then a year later, for my father-in-law, since my wife is not obligated to say Kaddish, so I said it for him. So suddenly I was a minyan goer. And like so many of us sitting in the room, we get thrown into a situation where we find that this intimate conversation with God, you're suddenly in a fellowship with other people who are having conversations with God. And you find out that everybody has things that they're praying for, they're davening for. In some cases, it's davening for a refuah, for a family member, and we're all in the same boat. In other cases, it may be for a shidduch. In other cases, praying that this deal comes through because God knows I need this deal. Or others of us sitting here who are physicians saying, I hope I can save this person. And if I didn't save this person, could I have done more? We don't know. So davening is a serious, serious business. And from that standpoint, it's a heavy responsibility for whoever the Shliach Tzibur is, whoever the Baal Tefilah is, whoever the Chazan is. It's a lot different than I think we ever expected it. People, I was brought up in a shul with the Chazan. My father was the Chazan, and I'm a Chazan at KJ in Manhattan. So in most shuls, when the Chazan is hired to be the Chazan, he davens Kabbalah Shabbos, he davens Shacharis, he davens Musaf. And the challenge for a regular Chazan is, in Baruch Hashem, I've been at KJ now, going on in one capacity or another, almost 30 years. And I had the particular schus, in light of what I said before, of having succeeded my father, who was an extraordinary man in another way too, because I didn't touch my father in terms of sheer talent. He had an extraordinary voice. And he was a real mensch. And I know Shabbos after Shabbos, my father would say to me, Mayer, you're a master. Wow. That was very, very powerful for me. But every Shabbos that I davened, I knew that I had to connect with the mispalalim. And I had my father encouraging me in that direction. Now, my task as a shliach tzibur in a shul like KJ, or in any chazan, my task is, if you're going there week after week, and until recently I was there 3 times a month, now I'm there twice a month. But 3 times a month, if they hear you Shabbos after Shabbos after Shabbos after Shabbos, you got to mix it up a little bit. You can't, you can't do the same thing week in and week out. Although, without saying who that chazan was, there was a wonderful chazan who every single Shabbos that he was there, he did the same kedusha for 50 years. Now, by the way, people who want routine, they want to feel comfortable in shul, that's fine. I don't have that luxury. Now, all of you, and even me for that matter when I daven here, have a different situation. And these are some of the things I'm going to talk about. When you're davening for the Yom, we're going to talk about davening in a minute, and we're going to talk about what your obligation is in a minute. But when you daven, let's say you're davening shacharis. It's a yortzeit, you have a simcha in the family, you're a friend of the Baal Simcha, and they ask you to daven shacharis. So you have to think of a lot of things. One of the things you have to think about, and you'll see here in the sheets that I've given you, one of the things you're going to have to think about, I'm talking about the partial list of things to keep in mind when you're the Baal Tefilah, is if you're davening shacharis, there are a lot of things you have to think about. I think about it all the time when I'm davening. But what you have to think about is, let me see, what else is going on in the Shabbos? How many Sifrei Torah do we have today? Is it also Shabbos Mefarchen? Is there a scholar in residence? How long is that scholar in residence going to speak? What you have to think about, thank you, Rabbi. What you have to think about partially is, if I'm down in Shacharis and I say, I love this particular piece, whether it's something in Shekein Chovas Kol HaYitzurim or something else, I just want to do it the way I want to do it. But you can't do that, because somewhere in the middle of this, I think in number 4, it says, keep in mind these 2 words, always. Tircha de Tzibura. You have to think of that too. For those of you who don't know means, you have to think about how many people are going to be annoyed that it's taking so long, because things have changed. People don't have the same kind of patience that they once had. It used to be, as my father used to tell me, Jews were excluded from going to concert halls. They weren't allowed to go to symphonic concerts. And so their entertainment, their spiritual fulfillment, came from going to shul and listening to some incredible voices who kept them there, and they weren't leaving so fast. How many of you remember going to hear Kusavitsky? This is not back in the 16th century or 17th century, but even last century. How many heard Kusavitsky in person? Moshe or David. David was actually one of, thank you. Okay, I didn't do it with Nusach, but so people would routinely go to shul, and went to shul. They'd stay till 2 o'clock, 2:30 in the afternoon. Which reminds me of a joke that there were so many great chazanim in Borough Park. People would go they'd go shul hopping. You could hear Kusavitsky here. Maybe, I don't know if this is factual, but Kusavitsky here, and then you want to go for Musaf, you'll go hear Kvartin there, and you'll hear Hirschman there, and they go from place to place. And there were these kids. They wanted to grow up to be chazan themselves. So they go to these shuls, and they would try to get in, but you had to pay a relatively large amount of money to go in to hear these chazanim. So they'd go in, and finally there's an usher out there who's watching the door and not letting just anybody in, and these kids are begging to get in. And finally they begged, please let him. He said, all right, I'll let you in, but I don't want to catch any of you davening. So that's what it was. But things have changed. Things have changed now. With the Young Israel movement, and there's so many wonderful things about the Young Israel movement. This shul is a perfect example of it. It's the learning that goes on here, the camaraderie that goes on here, the chesed that goes on here is wonderful. But I think, and I think I'm pretty accurate about this, that Young Israel was formed partially as a reaction to the star chazanim thing. That chazanim, a lot of them had a particular talent, and some of them were extraordinary, but some of them also maybe developed large egos. And people got sick of that, and Young Israel started and became a more democratic institution, and more people could participate. So there were some very good things about that, and there were some things that were a little less good, because what happened is, and this has been happening certainly for the last, 40 years, 50 years, probably closer to 40, and probably to a certain extent, with the advent of Shlomo Krabach doing what he did. I know when I got married, there were just a couple of bands. There was David Wakely, and who were the other ones? Shelley was already, huh?
The Epstein brothers.
And the Epstein brothers. So what happened is people started slowly getting away from listening to the Star Chazanim, and people had a little less patience of it. And with the democracy of public davening, people wanted to daven more and more for the Amud. And what started happening, and we're going to get to this very shortly, what started happening was people started incorporating all kinds of melodies into the davening. And again, probably Shlomo Krabach was somewhat responsible, and he followed both Mozich and Chabad a little bit. And people started incorporating melodies that they liked. Now, I love a lot of Shlomo Krabach melodies. And Ellie, you said he was a master. My father used to say about Shlomo Krabach, and this is all going somewhere, I promise you. My father used to say by Shlomo Krabach that he had a particular gift. I know, as one who has written songs myself, Krabach would write songs that, a songwriter might say, any yolt can write this. It's so predictable. It's so, it's so predictable. It's easy. For those of you who play instruments, it's the G chord and the C chord, 1, 5, 4, and it was an easy. But you know what? What my father said about him is, but Krabach's nigunim, hakten kop. You found yourself walking down the street, you couldn't get that melody out of your head. And people got used to being able to do these kinds of melodies. And it was very, very powerful. So what's happened is probably with the advent of Krabach, and then later on with some of the Dvekas boys, A.B. Rottenberg, and so many others, people wanted to sing along. And that's very powerful too, because it became no longer a participatory experience, a listening experience. It became a participatory experience. People were able to really express themselves fully. I know, for instance, when I daven Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, how many of you, if you can raise your hand, how many people daven something from the Yom Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur? Almost half the group here tonight. You're all going to say the same thing, I'm sure. Notwithstanding, David, and you daven also Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, to David Linder. The experience of davening Yomim Noraim from the Yomud is an incredible experience. And why? Because, as I say, Kol Atzmosai Tomarna. I can sing with every fiber of my being. I can pour my heart out to God, and while I'm doing it, since everyone is inspired, maybe they're scared, maybe they're worried, you get to the sound of tokef, you don't know what it's going to be. So I can sing with full kavanah. And not only full kavanah, I can sing with all my heart and soul and my voice, every fiber of my being. That's a very meaningful davening. But on a typical Shabbos, as the Baal Tefilah, as the Shliach Tzibur, you have the responsibility of inspiring everybody else. What I was going to say, and I think I made reference to it before, was that you're supposed to have this intimate conversation, but there's a lot of people. And when you come to shul, that's one of the strengths of Young Israel and a lot of Orthodox shuls. We're comfortable in shul. So we walk into shul, maybe we mean to have the kavanah, to have an intimate conversation with the Ribono Shel Olam. Maybe we are in that mood. But we come in, we say, hey, how you doing? What's going on? How's business? How's stuff? How's the baby? How's your wife? How's Parnassa? You see a kid or somebody's grandkid, and you give them a lollipop. So people are very comfortable in shul. But comfortable means they want to schmooze with each other. It's a natural thing. We want fellowship. So your job as the Shliach Tzibur, as the Baal Tefilah, is you have to balance out. You're representing them and giving them kavanah, and you're also competing with everybody talking to each other. Why wouldn't they want to talk to each other? So that's your job. So let's get to Nusach a little bit. I have a particular way that I approach Nusach, and I've had arguments with some of my colleagues about this too. And I'm not just talking about halacha here. For me, if I'm trying to create a specific environment for everybody else, it's not just an issue of the minhag hamakom or the proper nusach, but on a certain level, it offends my sensibilities if you go out of the nusach. Why? Because what nusach really is, aside from Nusach Tefillah, I'm not talking about Ashkenaz versus Sfarad in terms of what the words say, although I will say that if anybody's looked at a Sfarad Siddur or an Ari Siddur, the truth is I find it a much more personal kind of tefillah. There's much more of ono, much more personal when you're praying to God. But when you daven with Nusach, the Nusach really serves as something that's the gateway to the next tefillah. It creates a certain spiritual environment. There's something about it. Let's give an example.
How would you define Nusach if you had to define it?
I would say it's a musical mode. The question was, how do you define Nusach? It is a musical mode that has actually been established. It was established essentially, and I'm not an expert on the history of Nusach, but it's supposed to go back to the 14th century, believe it or not, to the Maharil, who was, I believe, the chief rabbi of the Rhineland, and was also an accomplished chazan. And some people call these Misinai melodies, and I'm only talking about Ashkenazic, but it's a musical style that creates a specific environment for a particular part of davening. And that kind of environment sets a certain mood. Probably the best example of doing that is, let's take something like Chatzi Kaddish. One second. Rabbi Josh, do I have to say the bracha again?
Yeah.
Thank you. It's good to have a rabbi in the house. For more than one reason. And Rabbi Gala's uncle is a very fine chazan himself too. And his son is wonderful too. So it's wonderful. So let's take Chatzi Kaddish. That's a perfect example of how to deal with Nusach. You'll understand it more than any words, I'll say.
By the way, who's the chazan who for 50 years davened the same thing?
You'll never know. So, the Kaddish was this. I'm going to do this. Yiskadal ve'iskadash shemei Rabbo. That's a particular melody, Kaddish. When are you supposed to do that? Anybody? When? What? After laning? Musaf? What? Okay. Josh was right. It's only really supposed to be done after we finish reading the Torah.
Although in the 1980s, the Young Israel movement did it before Muslim also. Correct.
That's Young Israel.
I'm just saying, that was
Right. So the truth is, and I love Young Israel, that's not necessarily a raya. And there's somebody had made...
I'm just saying, that was our Shul Minhag here.
Right.
Was in the 1980s, that was the Kaddish
Right.
after laning and before.
So and actually there's a reason that I'm saying what I'm just saying about this. For instance, that melody, Yiskadal ve'iskadash shemei Rabbo. For one thing, what it does, you're associating it with after the Torah reading. You expect it, and it has a certain feel to it. Now, I'll give you another Chatzi Kaddish, which is pretty much the correct one for before Musaf, and you'll see why in a second. Yiskadal v'iskadash. There are variations. Shemei Rabba, B'yamad Baruch Hu, say, etc., etc. Damiron be'yolemo ve'imeru. Amen. What follows that after the Chazor Shas? When before Chazor Shas, how does it start? Baruch atah Hashem. So what that Nusach is telling you what's coming up in anticipation. And you have a certain feeling when that happens. I'll give you another one. Yiskadal ve'iskadash shemei Rabba.
It's Tal,
Right? Huh?
Tal.
It's very interesting to say it's Tal. Is it Tal? It's Nila. Now, by the way, you should know that I'm not so smart with this. The first time I davened Nila, it was at a particular shul, and I went right ahead with Nila like this. He's Gadol. I went and I did the Nusach for Chatzi Kaddish for Tal and Geshem. I was went right ahead. Of course, sometimes this was a group that was not particularly knowledgeable. They said, very nice job. But, however, this gives you an idea of what Nusach is. As soon as you go, Yisgadal v'Yiskadashim, it puts you in a certain frame of mind. What frame of mind? Nila, the gates are going to be closing. It creates an atmosphere. It creates an environment. How about this? Yiskadal v'Yiskada shemei Rabbo Yomod Rachusei Yamlich Malchusei. Not as easy. What? Anybody? Friday night. That's right. Okay?
Not every chazan does that.
I didn't say. I'm just telling what the Nusach is. Now, by the way, it's very interesting.
There are some chazanim that don't use that.
What do they use?
They do it. It's more standard Kaddish.
That's
Not-
because some
It's-
chazan-
so what-
Chazan, I say chazan and I don't say
Right.
I've heard from Baal Tefilah. I've heard from
Right. So,
Just because some chazan can't go from
the shoulder.
from minor to Fred.
right.
Goes along.
So I was going to say, by the way, what was the other? Here. So we did that one. How about how about this? And this is going to be very interesting too. We're going to get to all these things. Here we go. Yisgadal v'Yiskada shemei Rabbo B'yom Modiv Rochirusei V'amlich Malchusei B'chayichon. What? When before Baruch? Shacharis weekday. Remember that. Right. Now, by the way, again, this is not just rules. I find, for me, maybe can you be an istinist in something other than walking into a sukkah? Maybe I'm an istinist. It gets to me. But when I hear the right nusach, it helps me daven.
So Mayor, you're saying that Nusach is basically defined already, that you have to stick to that type of Nusach depending on what kind of...
Yeah, I think that by the I don't want to say have to. Nobody's going to shoot you down. But you ought to. And your job as the Shliach Tzibur, as the Baal Tefilah, is to put people into that frame of mind. That's what you should do. That's one of the reasons that, for instance, that I'm a bit of a stickler for it. Because I can tell you, just as a Baal Bus, you know what? Let's go to it now for a second. We're going to, wow, gee, this didn't go as planned, but it's okay. So let's. I was going to start by Psukei de Zimra for Shabbos. Instead, I'm going to go to Shacharis for Shabbos. Let's go to Shacharis for Shabbos. You can see what I'm talking about. First, and I'm going to make quick reference to this too. Shacharis for Shabbos should not sound. It should not sound like weekday. You know why? Because it's Shabbos. And the melody, the nusach. There's a classic story. Somebody walks off the street. Did I tell you this before at the beginning? Somebody walks off the street and hasn't been in shul for years. He should come in, and as I said before, he should come in and say, "Oh, I'm listening to nusach. It must be Shabbos. It must be Rosh Chodesh." Remember I said that before? So it should. The Psukei de Zimra should be what you would think. Simple. People, remember, they're going to shul. They got to catch a train. They got to go somewhere. They got to go to work. They've got to do what they've got to do. So it's a very simple, unelaborate kind of nusach. But when you're doing Shabbos, it should sound a little bit fancier. It should sound a little bit nicer. So let's say, for instance, Psukei de Zimra. I had that in my flyer too. There's a nusach Psukei de Zimra, and there's special nusach Psukei de Zimra Shabbos. Yes, but most shuls, you wouldn't know it. It sounds like it could be Tuesday. So there happens to be a nusach, and the nusach for it is this, and probably Dan, you would know this because and a lot of the Yekesha shuls and the Royer shuls, they're very makpid on nusach, very makpid, because it changes the character of the davening. So instead of, for instance, during the week. Whatever. Right? That's what it is. Shabbos, you should feel it in the nusach. So, for instance, there is the traditional nusach, there's a variation of it, is basically this. Let's say I'll start it with Mizmor Shir. Mizmor Shir, Chanukas Habayis LeDavid. Is that it? 1 second. Here we go. Oh, here it is. You remember this from Shari. Usneinu hayom v'chol yom v'cheinu chesed rachamim beinech v'einecho roeinu v'sigmolenu chasodim tovim baruch ato Hashem. There are variations of this. Gomer chasodim tovim lamo Yisrael, or baruch ato Hashem gomer chasodim tovim lamo Yisrael. So if you're walking off the street, you say, "Ooh, it's Shabbos." It changes the character of my davening. Now. So you start, as the brachas for Shabbos, you do regular brachas like during the week, and then you switch it right after, Usneinu hayom v'chol yom v'cheinu chesed rachamim beinech v'einecho roeinu gomer chasodim tovim lamo Yisrael, and that's the second nusach we've heard. The third nusach starts happening just like during the week when we changed V'yolu Mosheim Bar Tzion Lishpatar Isbot Zarisov, that changes during the week. On Shabbos it changes too. We now have a third version of Nusach on Shabbos, and what is it? If you go to also V'yolu Mosheim Bar Tzion, which would be, I guess, in the Art Scroll, and this gives you an idea what it is. 400. Page 400. All right. Get the Kila Shem Amlucha. What happens? the chazan, whoever's davening, even if he's just doing Pesukei de Zimra, he is signaling, guess what? We're going to a different section of tefillah. We're going to, we're going to talk about God, Malchus, God in the environment, and God, it's going to be different. So instead of we had Baruch Hashem le'olam amen v'amen Ato Hashem Elokim asher b'chadri Avram Santos Avram Masos Lova Neman lefonecha v'charos imo habris. Keep going. Then we get to the middle of page 400, and guess what happens? Listen to this. Kila Shem Amlucho Moshe Bagoyim. I'm sorry. Kila Shem Amlucho Moshe Bagoyim. Valu Moshe v'Artzon V'Zar V'Sol Hashem Amlucho V'Shem Melech Kol Haaretz. Vayom Aviyah Hashem Echad U'Shemo Echad. Start Nishmas. Right. Take the lead in leading davening. That's telling you what's coming up next. Now watch this, and now you're going to see what I was talking about with different congregational melodies. Now we stay with this, right? Shochenad marom v'kadosh shemo. All right? There are variations of it, right? Umakalos rivos, and I'm going to get this in right now while we're still here. This gets into the part of knowing if there's a lot of simchas, this is going to be a long davening, and you're davening shacharis. I'm sorry if I'm mixing issues here, but for instance, let's get to makalos, okay? First, the nusach is what we said it is. Shekein chovas kol eitzurim levonecha Hashem Elokeinu melkei avoseinu leodos lalel. There are variations. Leodos lalel shabeach lefoer. All right? But that's the basic nusach is there. So this is another thing keep in mind. All right? Like this. Let's say this is a real world davening. I'm up here. I'm davening for the Amid. Here it is. Shekeinechovas kol hayitzurim lefonecha Hashem Elokeinu ve'Elokei. What? Thank you. So when I said, and this is one of my notes in here, as soon as, it's like, remember, name that tune? You say, I can name that tune in 4 notes, in 3 notes. You can sing that syllable in 2 notes or in 14 notes. You do it 14 notes, you're going to be doing, you were singing, you were a congregational chazan for a while. Suddenly you're doing a solo. Because half the shul is going, that goes back to the Tircha D'Sibura. So I'm sorry I'm mixing issues, but I wanted to mention that. So the Nusach is the Nusach. We continue, okay? Yizgadal, Yizgada, Shemei Rabo, Shochenad, Marom, Kado, Shemo, Nishmas, Kol Chayt. Stay in that world. Stay in that philosophical world. Stay in that emotional, spiritual world. So we're there, all right?
Can I ask one question on that? Only because
sure.
You hear it differently, and I think there might be a difference.
Sure.
Is there a difference when people do it like in minor, like you're doing, Shochenad Marom Mekadosh Shema, or Shochenad Marom Mekadosh Shema, like
that's fine.
Like a difference?
No, it's just a variation. As long as you're in that particular musical mode, da 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 da. That's a minor mode, and the major mode would be think of do adir, do re mi fa sol la ti do. Different sound. Now, we keep going. What's this? Let's go down to, and I think we'll finish with this because it's getting late. So let's finish before Kelodon. Let's do same, and think in your head, Shochenad Marom V'Kadosh Shemo, whatever variations there are of that, etc. So now let's go to every time I'll do it a little differently, but that's the basic mode. Let's go to Watch this. Huh? Why? You just took somebody's concentration. He was in a particular spiritual and emotional place, And so, by the way, it's a great Krabach tune. But think a little bit. You really need to think about that stuff because your obligation is to try to get their kavanah in a certain place. So that's what it is. So what I would recommend, for instance, for that, and there's tons of things. You know, when I left you a list of suggested Fragish melodies for Chazor Ashas. You'll understand what that is in a minute. So there's a lot. You'll notice, by the way, I came up and you know, Ellie and I, we're going to start running out very soon, right, Ellie? On Fragish. There's not as many Fragish melodies. And Fragish melodies, I was looking for, I was hacking Ellie Zamek, I was hacking Vel Pasternak. I want to know, give me some good Fragish melodies. So why was I looking for these kinds of melodies? Because this. Yismach Moshe, Chazor Shas V'Shachris, and Tikanto Shabbos, Chazor Shas V'Musaf. Start, everybody for Yismach Moshe. How does it go? Yismach Moshe. Yeah, ben emon karas alo. How about Tikanto Shabbos? Right, that's the Nusach. It's the correct Nusach. It puts you in a certain frame of mind. I can tell you, and again, I know, Hesh, you're going to want to know which chazan. I'm not going to tell you either. There's a prominent chazan, excellent chazan, knows Nusach cold, but in his shul and a lot of other shuls. So if we're in the Yismach Moshe Tikanto Shabbos mode, Tikanto Shabbos Rotziso Kavanoseh, and we're still in that mode when we get Elokeinu v'Gavazeinu Baruchinu B'Amrucham Shuleshes B'Torah Ksuvayidei Moshe Avdecha Amram V'Yaron Vanov Konim Agrosecha Kamur Yivarecha Hashem V'Yishmerecha Kein Yiratzon Yisrael Hashem Vanov Elecha V'Yichuneka Yisrael Hashem Panav Elecha V'Yasem Lecha Shalom Sim Shalom Tova. What? Why?
Because people like it.
So, by the way.
Yes, I like it.
I like it too. It's a wonderful melody. And not only that, there's another great Krabach melody. Sim Shalom Tova. It's a great melody. So I'm not saying don't use that melody. You can use that melody. Use it for something else. So what I'm suggesting is this. See this list here? Take a look. And this, with Ellie's help and some others' help, other helps too. Let's go. Yosem lecha shalom. Listen to this. Yosem lecha shalom. Sim shalom tova. Also Krabach. Tova racha chein v'chesed v'rachamim. And it Baruch Hata Hashem. Right? It fits in. So that's one that's good. How about this? I haven't tried it for Sim Shalom, but I might do it for Yismechu. How about this? Moshe mes v'soyrosayem es tikanto Shabbos rotzisa kavanoseh variko silochem bracha tikanto Shabbos rotzisa kavanoseh. Look at number 28. Right? However, Nagi tikanto Shabbos rotzisa Rab David even Mizralu. How about here's another. There's a great Chabadnik which I wrote here. I can't pronounce it right, but it's so what I'm saying, I don't disagree with you, Bob. I think it's a terrific melody, but use it somewhere else. So when I was saying with Eli Khan that there's not a lot of Fragish Nigunim, I have a partial list which I'm going to give you if you decide to want to come to another session. If I have a partial list, I'm starting with I have how many? 45, 35 over here. Minor ones, and I don't think I've touched the surface. I have 150. So what I'm saying is, I'm not saying it's a great melody, but try to fit it into the particular nusach, into the frame of mind that you want to have.
You're assuming that people are listening before you get there.
Let me tell you. Yeah, I'm going to tell you something.
People will listen if you do it right.
But now this is, and I'm going to end with this.
Then you wake them up with that song.
Wait a second. I'm going to end with this now. Okay. And I'm careful. My wife reminded me not to say anything controversial. So here goes. Look, there is a problem. There's a problem all over, except for certain kinds of shuls, certain yeshiva shuls. There's a problem with decorum. And I'm telling you that the Baal Tefilah can have a greater impact on the decorum than any president, than any rabbi, than any gabbai saying, stop it already. Or, because when you're up there, you can help control that environment and help control and help direct somebody to have a certain kavanah and davening and have his intimate conversation among all his friends. Thank you very much. I hope we'll come for another one. I think next one we'll do Hallel, and there's plenty to talk about. Thank you so much.
There, that's